gamers have known for a long time something that everyone else is starting to figure out: there's community connection on the other side of a screen. Our entire lives have led up to this, my friends joked with me in mid-March. I was sitting in my tiny New York City apartment, panicky and coming to terms with the reality that I'd be trapped inside for weeks, potentially months. But my friends reassured me that as lifelong video game enthusiasts, the prospect of sitting on a sofa in front of a TV for an interminable stretch would be a cakewalk. After all, gamers like me do already spend plenty of time in front of our screens all on our own. But even sitting alone for hours, gamers aren't necessarily isolated. In many cases, far from it. With the rise of social media, gamers, particularly in Gen Z, have perfected the art of building communities in and around video games. Gamers don't just compete with strangers on the internet, but forge genuine, enduring friendships. In this age of long-haul social distancing and mental health strains, gamers have long had a tool that's now bringing some relief to those who've never picked up a controller before. The explosive growth of gaming during the pandemic has shown that many have found a new outlet for much-needed connection in isolation. When shelter-in-place orders came down, millions of people around the world turned to tech-fueled diversions to stay in touch with family and friends, like Netflix party film viewings, Zoom chats and video games. There's the Outer Space Saboteur mobile game Among Us, which 100 million people have downloaded, and the Jackbox games that mix video chatting and elements of classics like Pictionary, and that have acted as stand-ins for in-person happy hours. Perhaps the most well-known is Animal Crossing: New Horizons. Released in March, Nintendo's record-breaking Switch game that tripled the company's profits drops players in a tiny tropical town filled with talking anthropomorphic animal neighbors who help them redecorate their home, catch butterflies and grow fruit trees. Gaming has skyrocketed during the pandemic, reaching people who'd play every now and then, or even those who had previously snubbed it entirely. In the US alone, 4 out of 5 consumers in one survey played video games in the last 6 months, according to a new study by NPD, an American business research firm. And at a time in which many industries are in dire straits, sales in gaming are booming. Global revenue is expected to jump 20% this year to $175 billion, £130 billion. The explosive growth of gaming during the pandemic has shown that many have found a new outlet for much-needed connection in isolation. But although the concept of socialization in a game is new to many, video game enthusiasts have been using tech like this to build friendships online and stay connected for years. Mark Griffiths is a professor at Nottingham Trent University who's written about gaming friendships in the pandemic, and studied socialization in video games for decades. In 2003, he published a study that showed a quarter of 11,000 players of the online role-playing game EverQuest said their favorite part of the game was connecting with other players. He says the study was a direct and early contradiction of the stereotype that video games are isolating, and gamers antisocial, even though those early pandemic memes jokingly played off those stereotypes. In another study from 2007, he looked at 912 players of massively multiplayer online, MMO, role-playing games from 45 countries who played on average around 22 hours a week, concluding that the online game environment was highly socially interactive. He says, 10% of those in the survey actually ended up forming romantic relationships outside of the game. The idea of socializing in a game is not new at all. Fast forward to 2020, and Griffiths says that when lockdowns began and people had nothing much to do, maybe they're gaming for the first time, and they realized this was an outlet you can naturally socialize in. For example, in Animal Crossing, players can visit the towns of both real-life friends or strangers who share their village code online. Flying on a virtual seaplane into my brother's village, filled with friendly koalas, has become our 2020 ritual as he continues to isolate from Washington, D.C., and we miss family holidays. I also visit friends scattered all over the world, including one from secondary school whom I haven't seen since 2000. Some people have held their birthday parties via Animal Crossing this year, others go on dates, and some couples who canceled their weddings because of COVID-19 have even gotten married in the game. There's also an online fan-made marketplace where players connect to trade fruits and rare furniture, called Nookazon. The site hosts trivia nights and chat meetups for Animal Crossing players. The pandemic really opened a lot of people's eyes, even non-gamers, to what games can do to bring people together, says Daniel Lu'u, the founder of Nookazon, who's a software developer and an active gamer based in Washington, D.C. He says one of his site's most popular top sellers is a 50-year-old woman who's never played video games in her entire life. I think the reason Animal Crossing has become so successful is because anyone can play it. There are tons of cute items, tons of fun characters, tons of customizations, he says. It really helped show that video games aren't just all, like, Call of Duty. Maybe they're gaming for the first time, and they realize this was an outlet you can naturally socialize in. Mark Griffiths-Slinju is a graduate student in psychology at the University of Albany in New York. In September, she wrote a paper on Animal Crossing and the pandemic, published in the journal Human Behavior and Emerging Technologies. Ju says Animal Crossing in particular provides laid-back escapism and soothing feelings of safety in these turbulent times, which has helped bring new gamers into the hobby. The pandemic has not only reduced face-to-face communication opportunities, but also allowed more people to learn about games as a novel platform to get social interaction. Amazon owned Twitch, where people watch other people play video games in live webcasts, chatting in real time with the streamer and other viewers, clocked 5 billion hours of viewed content in the second quarter of 2020 alone. The engagement is an 83% increase from last year. It's a new record. This is what we have been doing for years, says Erin Wayne, the company's director of community and creator marketing. She started out as a streamer on the site herself, playing the best-selling game of all time, Minecraft. It's the same game in which an elementary school in Japan held a virtual graduation in lieu of an in-person ceremony because of COVID-19. She says the basic model of connecting gamers with streamers hasn't changed because of COVID. Wayne adds, as Twitch has become more popular, it's expanded its platform beyond gamers, especially during social distancing restrictions in 2020. Book authors are hosting book launches, musicians are holding concerts, and even drag queens are putting on shows, all following the gamer-streamer model. There are also new communities of gamers that have formed on the site, including LGBTQ gamers and gamers who served in the armed forces. Like many communities, gaming has its share of toxicity and hostility. But when Jeanne Lopez, a London-based gamer, launched a closed Facebook group in 2015 called Black Girl Gamers as a safe and inclusive space in the face of racism and sexism in the gaming community, she was able to build a vibrant community that's since grown across platforms like Twitch. This summer, it even hosted a summit of entirely black female professionals in the industry, which has long been dominated by white men. Lopez says that games have helped old and new players alike keep connected, social and sane during the pandemic. For a long time, people have either looked down on that or called gamers weird, but now people and companies want to know how to maintain relationships and communities digitally. It's more accessible for people. So, although more people staring at a screen may seem like an unhealthy habit, even the World Health Organization believes it could be key in nurturing our bonds with others. Earlier this year, it launched #PlayApartTogether. And as mental health professionals stress the importance of relationships, connections and community in these times, they're even beginning to find direct psychological and social benefits from gaming across the generations. As the pandemic rolls on and millions around the world face months of social isolation, gaming continues to be a surprising lifeline. Those new players may keep on gaming even after they're allowed to socialize in person, too. A Google survey showed that 40% of new gamers say they're likely to continue playing video games after the pandemic. Now it's just been brought into the mainstream. A lot more people have realized what it can do. Gaming bringing communities together has always been there, says Nookazon's Lu'u. It's been there for years. APJ Abdul Kalam ignited minds unleashing the power within. India Penguin Books contents about the author dedication. Preface 1. The dream and the message 2. Give us a role model 3. Visionary Teachers and Scientists 4. Learning from Saints and Seers 5. Patriotism Beyond Politics and Religion 6. The Knowledge Society 7. Getting the Forces Together 8. Building a New State 9. To My Countrymen Epilogue Song of Youth References Acknowledgements Copyright page Penguin Books Ignited Minds APJ Abdul Kalam is one of India's most distinguished scientists. He was responsible for the development of India's first satellite launch vehicle, the SLV-3, and the development and operationalization of strategic missiles. As chairman of the Technology Information, Forecasting, and Assessment Council, he pioneered India Vision 2020, a roadmap for transforming India into an economically developed nation by 2020, focusing on PORA as a development system for country-wide implementation. Kalam held various positions in the Indian Space Research Organisation and the Defence Research and Development Organisation and became principal scientific advisor to the Government of India, holding the rank of a cabinet minister. The President of India between 2002 and 2007, Kalam has been awarded honorary doctorates from 38 universities and the country's three highest civilian honors, Padma Bhushan, 1981, Padma Vibhushan, 1990, and Bharat Ratna, 1997. Kalam has authored 15 books on a variety of topics that have been translated into many languages across the world. His most significant works are Wings of Fire, India 2020, A Vision for the New Millennium and Ignited Minds. He now conducts lectures on societal development in many international institutes and is involved in research on different societal missions. Praise for the book The Strength of Ignited Minds lies in the scientist's ability to present some of the most tangled issues that confront the nation in easily digestible packages of information. Raj Chenap in India Today. Kalam is a dreamer of great dreams. Ignited minds will fire the minds of the young to whom it is primarily addressed. Khushwant Singh in Outlook. It is not possible in a short review to convey the vast erudition of a man who covers so much of India's past, present and future in such simple, communicable terms. Or his many revolutionary as well as practical ideas for the country which he so obviously loves, of which he is so proud and which he feels can be the country of his dreams by 2020. Amit Malik and Hindu Ignited Minds is a book to be read by the leaders and led, by young as well as old and by all who love their country. Kalam dares to say what has long needed to be said but which has gone unsaid. M.V. Kamathan Sentinel Ignited Minds is a lucid and elegant expression of Kalam's dreams about India's future. This is a feel-good book. It is a true patriot's self-help guide to a better nation. Wilson John in Pioneer. I dedicate this book to a child who is studying in class 12. Her name is Snehal Thakur. On April 11, 2002 when I reached Anand by road in the evening, it was under curfew following communal disturbances. The next day, at the Anand Laya High School, while talking to the students, a question came up: who is our enemy? There were many answers, but the one we all agreed was correct came from her: our enemy is poverty. It is the root cause of our problems and should be the object of our fight, not our own. Preface. Nations consist of people. And with their effort a nation can accomplish all it could ever want. Motivating India's people, and its youth especially, is the central theme of Ignited Minds, which continues the trajectory of thoughts taken up in my earlier two books, Wings of Fire and India 2020, A Vision for the New Millennium, written with my friends Arun Tiwari and Y.S. Rajan. I have chosen to write about this subject of igniting young minds so that India turns into a developed nation by the year 2020 because all through my career in the field of technology and its management, I relied on the power and potential of youth. My strength has been my young teams who never let me down. And what satisfaction there was in working with them on some of the most complex projects in some of the most challenging situations. Given the freedom to achieve and guide it properly, I am convinced the young of India can accomplish far more. As I began writing, I wondered if I was not overreaching myself. I thought, who am I to write about this capacity of India to realize its destiny as a developed nation? What do I really know about how this can be accomplished beyond what I have learned in my projects and missions evolved around science and technology? Isn't this an area that political leaders, economists, thinkers and other competent people would address better? How am I qualified to tell others about an ability that has been generally ignored? At first, as I was putting down my experiences with youth, I had no idea of what I would have to say. However, I put aside my doubts and began to examine what I hear from the people I meet during my visits to different places, particularly children, saints and seers, teachers, scientists, industry leaders and even political leaders. I am sure on my part that India has the ability to transform itself into a developed nation. Through my projects in space, defense and nuclear sectors, I know that our people have the ability to achieve the best in the world. They have a fantastic mix of belief and knowledge that sets them apart from any other nation on earth. I also know that their potential has gone untapped because we have become used to being subjugated and docile. What better project can I undertake than to tell my people that what they dream of can become possible, that they can have anything that comprises a good life, health, education, the freedom to pursue their goals, and above all, peace. My quest for answers as to how this could be done took me to schools, the countryside, ashrams and many other places which were not part of my itinerary earlier. It was a new kind of experience, a very stimulating one at that. The paddy fields in Bihar left to an ad hoc cycle of agriculture, the untapped mineral wealth of a newly formed state of Jharkhand and the unattended biodiversity of Tripura are throwing a great challenge to the knowledge era that is dawning. In Assam, the sight of the mighty Brahmaputra almost mesmerized me. Its vast expanse of water filled me with a strange sense of helplessness. To the river's untapped flow was taking a gigantic mass of water into the sea. It made me think that as a nation too we were failing to utilize our tremendous energies. Where are we making a mistake? What is it that needs to be corrected? We have a roadmap in our 5-year plans that covers some of the things we need to achieve. We have most of the necessary resources. There seems to be an attitude problem, as if we cannot shake ourselves out of a mindset of limited achievement. This book is all about breaking away from the forces that would prefer us to remain a nation of 1 billion people selling cheap labor and raw materials and providing a large market for goods and services of other nations. I am writing this book to make my young readers hear a voice that says, "Start moving." Leadership must lead us to prosperity. Young Indians with constructive ideas should not have to see them wither in the long wait for approval. They have to rise above norms which are meant to keep them timid in the name of safety and to discourage entrepreneurship in the name of trade regimes, organizational order and group behavior. As it is said, thinking is the capital, enterprise is the way, hard work is the solution. Every nation has struggled to achieve its goals. Generations have given their best to make life better for their offspring. There is nothing mysterious or hidden about this, no alternative to effort. And yet we fail to follow the winning track. More than the problems outside globalization, recession, inflation, insurgency, instability and so on, I am concerned about the inertia that has gripped the national psyche, the mindset of defeat. I believe that when we believe in our goals, that what we dream of can become reality, results will begin to follow. Ignited Minds is about developing the conviction in ourselves, and discarding the things that hold us back. This was, in fact, a central thought that I kept in mind as I wrote. Share my dream of a developed India and see it made real in your own and others' lives. In my own way, I have tried to follow my beliefs, to do what I love doing. I have tried, however, to guide but not to impose my views on others. You will find in this book plain speaking, surge ahead as a developed nation or perish in perpetual poverty, subservient to a few countries that control the world politically and economically. There are no other alternatives. In the 9 chapters of this book, I take up various themes. I begin with a rumination on peace, without which there can be no progress, and on the shift in the direction of my own life that occurred after surviving a helicopter crash. There is a chapter based on my interaction with children all over India. Other chapters contain the insights I gained in my meetings with saints and seers, scientists, outstanding thinkers and others. There are accounts of some promising experiments in agriculture and in the medical field. Elsewhere I deal with concepts that carry the seed of solutions. The contents essentially come from the people of this nation, from what they have taught me. I have written this book as an expression of my faith in the potential of India and my countrymen. We have all the resources we need, whether it be people, talent, natural bounty or other assets. India is truly blessed with a real, though latent, abundance. Scarcity of resources is not the cause of our problems. Our problems originate in our approach towards them. We are spreading our resources too wide and too thin. With our resources and the money we spend, we could easily accomplish 3 times what we do, in half the time we normally take, if we were to operate in mission mode with a vision for the nation. The vision generates the best in every field. We must change tracks. It is imperative that our policy making become more responsive and efficient so that the stifled entrepreneurship is liberated. Key to that is better coordination among the various departments, rather than emphasis on priorities according to the preferences of individual departments. There are more reviews than views available. Every channel appears blocked by some obstacle or the other. The trapped energies and the suppressed initiative need to be freed and properly harnessed. Nor do we particularly need every time to borrow models from elsewhere. I don't think the American, Japanese or Singaporean solutions will work for us. Knocking at others' doors will be futile. Instead of importing theories and transplanting concepts, we need to grow our own solutions. Instead of searching for answers outside, we will have to look within for them. I hope that when you go through these 9 chapters you will be given the guidance that I got from the people of my country and feel connected to the wisdom that is so special to this soil. The reality of a developed nation will become part of your daily life. 20 years from now I may not be around. But I am sure many of you will be there to share in the glory of success and agree that I was right in being so confident. Many friends and associates helped me put this book together. I am grateful to them all. My special thanks to Mr. Y.S. Rajan and Dr. M.S. Vijayaraghavan for shaping my thoughts with their vital inputs. Dr. Ashavatanu Pillai has worked with me for a long time and his contribution has been both timely and invaluable in giving shape to ideas and thoughts. I am fortunate to have his friendship. I am grateful to Mr. H. Sheridan who directly keyed in my dictations into his laptop computer with outstanding skill. My co-author in Wings of Fire, Mr. Arun K. Tiwari, did his usual craftsmanship with words on the manuscript and I appreciate every bit of that. It was a great pleasure to work with Mr. Krishan Chopra of Penguin Books. From the emanation of my thoughts to the book's realization, his constant interaction was of great support. Chennai, April 2002. APJ Abdul Kalam. 1. The dream and the message. Dream transform into thoughts and thoughts result in action. On September 30, 2001. I was on my way to Bokaro from Ranchi in Jharkhand when the helicopter carrying me crashed moments before landing. It hit the earth with a thud after its engine failed. All of us on board had a miraculous escape. Grateful to God but unfazed by the incident, I went ahead with my scheduled program of addressing the students in Bokaro. At night, however, a panel of doctors persuaded me to take a tranquilizer to alleviate my perceived shock. The drug made me sleep hours ahead of my usual time. 1 a.m. I also failed to rise at my usual 6 a.m. and woke up only after 8 o'clock. It was, however, a disturbed sleep, and sometime in the middle of it, I fell to thinking why the human race, the best of all of God's creations, has been so deeply divided by violence. I imagined a conversation between 5 people who together symbolized the finest attributes of the human mind and whom I admire deeply. Through their conversation, I sought an answer. In this experience, much more intense and vivid than a dream, though for want of a better word I shall term it that, I saw myself in a desert with miles of sand all around. There was a full moon and the desert was bathed in its light. 5 men, Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein, Emperor Ashoka, Abraham Lincoln and Caliph Omar stood in a circle, their clothes ruffled by the wind. I felt myself dwarfed standing next to the majestic Emperor Ashoka. Ashoka led 2 lives, one as a ruthless conqueror and the other as a compassionate ruler. The man I stood beside was the one who had just returned from conquest. But victory had been obtained at heavy cost. The Battle of Kalina claimed the lives of at least 300,000 people and an equal number were wounded. I saw everyone looking at Ashoka who fell on his knees and removed his armor and crown. His face was pale, reflecting the death surrounding him. He looked at the sky. He saw the bright cool moon shining and God's grace pouring down on Mother Earth. And he looked down at the horror he had created, making blood flow everywhere. In that moment of beauty and horror, the silver moonlight and the suffering and pain on the ground, when nature itself seemed to speak out against what he had wrought, Ahimsa Dharma was born. Emperor Asoka embraced God's command to propagate love for human beings through this doctrine. As I stood by, I wondered, why the Kalinga War, why the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi and of Abraham Lincoln? Or many others like them? Has God Almighty faltered in His creation? Is the destruction of mankind essential for a second creation? In that blissful silence the Mahatma spoke, "Friends, the divine message we are hearing is the message of creation. Since we all belong to planet Earth, we may give a message to mankind, how people of different races, religions and languages can live peacefully and prosperously together. God Almighty has blessed us all with something unique that we passed on to mankind through our deeds and efforts. Is that working? Is there any divine message or doctrine? Divine beauty should enter the human soul and happiness blossom in the body and mind. Is it possible?" Asoka said, "Friends, there is one thing I have realized, there is no victory in causing suffering. Triumph is a peaceful kingdom." Caliph Omar said, "I learned after I entered Jerusalem that all men are equal. There is no point in forcing others to follow your path. You will get only that which is ordained for you. God alone is the sovereign." Caliph Omar never saw his position in terms of the special privileges that it carried. To him government was a sacred trust and he did his best not to betray that trust in any way. It was Einstein's turn. I would like to recall my friend Werner Heisenberg's view. In the West we have built a large, beautiful ship. It has all the comforts in it, but one thing is missing, it has no compass and does not know where to go. Men like Tagore and Gandhi and their spiritual forebears found the compass. Why can this compass not be put in the human ship so that both can realize their purpose? Abraham Lincoln, the great American leader who fought against slavery and whose life paralleled that of the Mahatma in certain respects, said at this point, "There is one thing that I would like to say, happiness comes from a family's prosperity at various levels. God's grace gives bliss to human lives. Happiness and bliss are two important components of a godly life on earth. Perhaps there is so much conflict between peoples and nations because in our pursuit of prosperity and power we have lost sight of ethical values. We must ask ourselves, what is the role of human consciousness? Does it have a part in political thinking, scientific thinking and theological thinking? Is spirituality acceptable in the business of life?" Mahatma Gandhi recalled sage Ashtavakra who propounded, "O my son, you are the very consciousness within which arises this phenomenal universe that is not separate from what you are. How can there be a question of anything being acceptable or unacceptable? Let the business of life be peace and prosperity, and not exploitation and conflict. This is our message to the planet. Everything that we do, any doctrine that we espouse, should be for the good of humankind." The next morning I kept sitting for some time drinking my tea and pondering about the strange dream. What if the helicopter had lost power at some more height? Just a few hours before my own mishap, a plane carrying a promising leader and a team of young and talented journalists had crashed, killing all. I had been lucky to survive and now there was the night's experience that seemed to hold a message for me. What should I do? I looked out of the window. The sun was well up in the sky and there was a soothing breeze. I have always lived in close touch with nature and have always found it a friend, giving without reservation. Like the mango tree, people throw stones at it, break off its branches, but it still offers its shade to the weary traveler, and its fruit to the hungry. Whether it was the sea at Rameswaram, Thumba and Chandipur, the desert at Pokhran, or the gigantic boulders in Hyderabad, nature has always made its presence felt wherever I have worked. It has helped to remind me of the divine force that pervades all of creation. I kept on pondering over my dream. And yet, the history of the world shows the forces of good struggling hard to make life better for mankind while the human race also shows a terrible capacity for destruction. Thus we have Gandhi, and other great saints and teachers who lay down the precepts for a happy and virtuous life, on the one hand, and on the other the death of millions in the Second World War and the dropping of atomic bombs that destroyed entire cities. Thousands have died in the Bosnia conflict. The Israel-Palestine conflict continues to take lives, and on September 11, 2001 terrorists used a new tactic to take lives when they struck at the World Trade Center in New York. At home, in the Bhopal gas tragedy, 30,000 people died as the result of the carelessness of a multinational company, and thousands more have died in the Kashmir Valley violence. On December 13, 2001, when the leaders of India were in parliament, an attempt was made by the terrorists to paralyze the country. Where will it all stop? Are we doomed to destroy ourselves? No, we have to find an everlasting solution. I recall a poem I wrote a few years ago, The Tree of Life. You, the human race, are the best of my creations. You will live and give till you are united, in happiness and pain. My bliss will be born in you. Love is a continuum, that is the mission of humanity. You will see every day in the life tree. You learn and learn, my best of creations. The 5 great human beings I saw in my dream lived at different times. In the modern world, there are few examples of human beings who embody the qualities that come from realizing the nature of the mind. Once a child asked me if I had read the Mahabharata, and if so, who my favorite character in it was. The multifaceted characters in the epic represent almost every aspect of human nature, good as well as bad. I told the child that I was particularly attracted to the character of Vidura, who showed grit against the wrongdoings of authority and had the courage to differ when everyone else chose to surrender before the tyranny of Adharma. Today, it is hard for us to find one true Vidura among our leaders. It is hard for us to imagine such an enlightened being, and even harder for us to aim for such enlightenment. More discouraging still is the quality of public life today, the low level of discourse and the presence of so much ego, anger, greed, jealousy, spite, cruelty, lust, fear, anxiety and turmoil. I felt a new determination dawning inside me. In this my most important decision, I decided to help discover the nature of India's true self in its children. My own work and indeed I as a person were relegated to the background. My scientific career, my teams, my awards, all this became secondary. I wanted instead to be a part of the eternal intelligence that is India. I hope to transcend myself and discover the inner, higher self that is in us through my interaction with joyous children. A man is said to pass through different stages in his lifetime. Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, in his book Manifest Your Destiny, makes an interesting categorization of them as athlete stage, warrior stage, statesperson stage and spirit stage. It occurred to me that nations too make a similar transition, and in extending this analogy to them I have termed the last 2 stages Big Brother and self-realization stages respectively. The stages do not follow in sequence necessarily, they can be coexistent, with one aspect dominant. In the first, athlete stage, a nation fresh from an independence struggle, or some other transition, embarks on an energetic pursuit of performance and achievement. This has happened in Japan, Singapore, and Malaysia. When a nation leaves this stage behind, it generally enters the warrior stage. Proud of its achievements, it finds ways to demonstrate its superiority over others, perhaps through conquest. Ego is the driving force. During this stage people are busy with goals and achievements in competition with others, and this, as Dyer points out for the individual, generates anxiety. Convincing others of its superiority becomes the theme. In the next, Big Brother stage, the ego has been tamed somewhat, and with its newfound maturity awareness shifts to what is important to other nations and societies. In the Big Brother stage the nation is still an achiever, but it is not so obsessed with proving its strength. The idea is to help others become better. The erstwhile Soviet Union by its developmental role in some countries had adopted this role. As with the individual, so too with the nation. The transition from the warrior stage to the Big Brother stage is a rewarding but difficult exercise. There is one stage even higher than this Big Brother stage. In this, a nation recognizes its truest essence. It comes out of the wisdom that the earth is no single nation's inheritance but of all, and its people are aware of the responsibility of the individual towards his fellow human beings. This can be called the realization stage, and India may have the potential to achieve it. In my working career of 43 years, I have changed my tasks in several institutions. Change is crucial. It brings new thought leads to innovative actions. On August 15, 2001, I took a decision to go for another change. I mentioned my intention to Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who asked me to rethink. I had spoken to him of my desire to be relieved on a few earlier occasions too, but he advised me to continue and prevail. As a rocket man too, I worked with stages. Each stage is jettisoned after taking the rocket further along its intended trajectory. I worked with the Indian Space Research Organisation, ISRO, during 1963-82. In 1980, India launched its first satellite launch vehicle successfully that put the Rohini satellite into orbit and became a member of the exclusive Space Club. I headed the team as project director of the mission for SLV-3. Our success in this effort gave the nation satellite launch vehicle technology and expertise in control, guidance, propulsion and aerodynamics, besides the ability to design various rocket systems. Above all, this project enriched the organization with enhanced capabilities in design, development and management systems integrating inputs from different institutions such as R&D laboratories, industry and academia. And the program also gave leaders in technology and management. Today they are all working in various space and defense programs. This was my first stage, in which I learned leadership from three great teachers: Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, Professor Satish Dhawan and Dr. Brahm Prakash. This was the time of learning and acquisition of knowledge for me. The second stage could then be from 1982 in the Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO. Again it was teamwork against the background of denial of technology through the instruments of the Missile Technology Control Regime, MTCR, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. I had the opportunity to work with teams and DRDO labs that led to the design, development, production and operationalization of two strategic missiles. These types of strategic missiles will not be available to India from any country, no matter how friendly our relations with it. During this period, 3 new laboratories and facilities, one in the area of missile technology called Research Center Meerut, RCI, at Hyderabad and 2 other missile test centers, one on the mainland and the other on an island, near Chandipur on the coast of Bay of Bengal, were born with excellent capabilities. In addition, the nation became strong as capability and critical technologies emerged from laboratories and academic institutions that helped us overcome the constraints of the MTCR. My team could design and develop any type of missile system, including the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, ICBM. During this stage, I have gone through many successes and some failures. I learned from failures and hardened myself with courage to face them. This was my second stage, which taught me the crucial lesson of managing failures. The third stage can be the participation in India's mission to become a nuclear weapons state with a great partnership between the Department of Atomic Energy, DAE, and DRDO with the support of the armed forces. This was a mission well accomplished. However, when children ask me, what has given you happiness in your life in the last 40 years? I say I get happiness when heart patients carry coronary stent in their arteries and when the physically handicapped children fitted with the lightweight floor reaction orthosis, FRO, calipers find their difficulties eased somewhat. Both of these came as spin-offs from missile technologies. During this stage, I held the position of chairman of the Technology Information, Forecasting and Assessment Council, TIFAC, under the Department of Science and Technology, for nearly 2 tenures, about 8 years. This period saw the creation of Technology Vision 2020 based on the work of task teams consisting of 500 experts in all who had available to them inputs from 5,000 scientists and technologists from different fields. Later, the Technology Vision document and the national security aspects got integrated and the Indian Millennium Missions, IMM 2020, emerged. When I took over as Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, in November 1999, the task was to do detailing and evolve a working plan for IMM 2020. It is indeed a roadmap for transforming India into a developed country, the second vision of the nation. Certain experimental work on education, agriculture and also development of a number of villages in an integrated way is currently progressing. A cabinet paper on the subject has been moved for approval of the government. During this third stage, it was building technological strength with institutional partnership, adapting technology to societal needs and formulating the vision for the nation that occupied me. The helicopter mishap of September 30, 2001 made me realize that the time to jettison the third stage had arrived. This thought was further reinforced on 2nd of October, the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, when I visited Mata Amritanandamayi's ashram at Kollam in Kerala. She emphasized the need to integrate spirituality with education to create a new generation of leaders and entrepreneurs. On October 12, 2001, 3 days before I would complete my 70 orbits around the sun, I formally wrote to the Prime Minister about my decision to retire and requested to be relieved in a month's time. He relented this time and I prevailed. Meanwhile, I keep visiting schools. During my visits to many states, particularly two of the northeastern states, Assam and Tripura, and Jharkhand, and also a few places in Tamil Nadu, I have addressed thousands of students. About 40,000 at last count. I have found that I communicate well with this age group, I share their imagination. Most important, through my interaction with them, I feel I can ignite in their minds a love for science, and through it, a sense of mission for achieving a developed India. Will this be my fourth stage? Shall I be successful? I really don't know. But what I do know is that there is no greater power in heaven or on earth than the commitment to a dream. Dreams hold something of that energy which lies at the heart of all things and are the binding force that brings the spiritual and the material together. It had been in my mind for the past few years to undertake research and teaching. For this purpose, combined with my desire to find time to meet school children, I have shifted to Anna University, my alma mater. What a great feeling it is to be among young people bubbling with creativity and enthusiasm. What a great responsibility the elders of this country have at hand to guide this tremendous energy in a constructive way for nation building. How can we make up for missed opportunities and the failures of the past? Summary: spirituality must be integrated with education. Self-realization is the focus. Each one of us must become aware of our higher self. We are links of a great past to a grand future. We should ignite our dormant inner energy and let it guide our lives. The radiance of such minds embarked on constructive endeavor will bring peace, prosperity and bliss to this nation. To give us a role model, men often become what they believe themselves to be. If I believe I cannot do something, it makes me incapable of doing it. But when I believe I can, then I acquire the ability to do it even if I didn't have it in the beginning. Mahatma Gandhi. Why should I meet young students in particular? Seeking the answer, I went back to my student days. From the island of rains war, what a great journey it's been. Looking back, it all seems quite incredible. What was it that made it possible? Hard work? Ambition? Many things come to my mind. I feel the most important thing was that I always assessed my worth by the value of my contribution. The fundamental thing is that you must know that you deserve the good things of life, the benefits that God bestows. Unless our students and young believe that they are worthy of being citizens of a developed India, how will they ever be responsible and enlightened citizens? There is nothing mysterious about the abundance in developed nations. The historic fact is that the people of these nations, the G8 as they are called, believed over many generations that they must live a good life in a strong and prosperous nation. The reality became aligned with their aspirations. I do not think that abundance and spirituality are mutually exclusive or that it is wrong to desire material things. For instance, while I personally cherish a life with minimum of possessions, I admire abundance, for it brings along with it security and confidence, and these eventually help preserve our freedom. Nature too does not do anything by half measures, as you will see if you look around you. Go to a garden. In season, there is a profusion of flowers. Or look up. The universe stretches into infinitude, vast beyond belief. All that we see in the world is an embodiment of energy. We are a part of the cosmic energy too, as Sri Aurobindo says. Therefore, when we begin to appreciate that spirit and matter are both part of existence, are in harmony with each other, we shall realize that it is wrong to feel that it is somehow shameful or non-spiritual to desire material things. Yet, this is what we are often led to believe. Certainly there is nothing wrong with an attitude of making do with the minimum, in leading a life of asceticism. Mahatma Gandhi led such a life, but in his case as in yours it has to be a matter of choice. You follow such a lifestyle because it answers a need that arises from deep within you. However, making a virtue of sacrifice and what is forced upon you to celebrate suffering is a different thing altogether. This was the basis of my decision to contact our young. To know their dreams and tell them that it is perfectly alright to dream of a good life, an abundant life, a life full of pleasures and comforts, and work for that golden era. Whatever you do must come from the heart, express your spirit, and thereby you will also spread love and joy around you. My first such meeting took place in a high school in Tripura. It was a gathering of 500 students and teachers. After my talk on the second vision for transforming India into a developed nation, there were a series of questions, two of which I would like to discuss. The first question was, where do we get a role model from? How do you get a role model? Whether we are aware of it or not, from childhood onwards, through various phases of life, we adopt role models. I said, when you were growing up, say till the age of 15, the best role model I can think of would be your father, your mother and your school teacher. They, to my mind, are the people who can impart the best guidance during this period. I turned to the teachers and parents present there and told them what a big responsibility they have. I personally believe the full development of a child with a value system can only come from these people. In my own home, when I was growing up, I used to see my father and mother say namaz 5 times a day, and in spite of their modest financial resources, I found them always giving to the needy around. My teacher, Shiva Subramania Iyer, was responsible for persuading my father to send me to school, setting aside financial constraints. It is very important for every parent to be willing to make the effort to guide children to be good human beings, enlightened and hard-working. The teacher, the child's window to learning and knowledge, has to play the role model in generating creativity in the child. This triangle is indeed the real role model I can think of. I would even go to the extent of saying that if parents and teachers show the required dedication to shape the lives of the young, India would get a new life. As it is said, behind the parents stands the school, and behind the teacher the home. Education and the teacher-student relationship have to be seen not in business terms but with the nation's growth in mind. A proper education would help nurture a sense of dignity and self-respect among our youth. These are qualities no law can enforce, they have to be nurtured ourselves. The children enjoyed this answer, though I don't know whether the parents and teachers got the message. Another girl in all seriousness asked, every day we read in the newspaper or hear our parents talk about Athankvadas, terrorists. Who are they? Do they belong to our country? This question really shocked me. I myself was searching for an answer. They are our own people. Sometimes we create them through political and economic isolation. Or they can be fanatics, sometimes sponsored by hostile nations, trying to disrupt normal life through terrorism. I looked at the audience, at the people sitting by my side, at the teachers, and at the sky for an answer. I said, children, I am reminded of our epics, the Ramayana and Mahabharata. In the Ramayana the battle is between the divine hero Rama and demon king Ravana. It is a long-drawn battle that finally Rama wins. In the Mahabharata, there is the battle at Kurukshetra. In this fight between good and evil, Dharma wins again. The battles are many but finally peace triumphs. In our times too we have seen this battle between good and evil, for instance, the Second World War. It seems to me that both good and evil will survive side by side. The Almighty does help them both to various degrees. How to minimize the evil through our spiritual growth is a question that has persisted throughout human history. On another occasion, I addressed a very large gathering of students at St. Mary's School, Dindigul in Tamil Nadu on their 75th anniversary celebrations. Among the large number of children wishing to meet me were two who were in a hurry to get an answer from me. One student asked, "I have read your book Agnisaragugul, the Tamil version of Wings of Fire. You always give a message to dream. Tell me, why dream?" My answer was to ask the gathered children to recite the following: dream, dream, dream. Dream transforms into thoughts. Thoughts result in actions. I told them, friends, if there are no dreams, there are no revolutionary thoughts. If there are no thoughts, no actions will emanate. Hence, parents and teachers should allow their children to dream. Success always follows dreams attempted, though there may be some setbacks and delays. Another boy asked, "Please tell me, who would be the first scientist in the world?" It occurred to me science was born and survives only by questions. The whole foundation of science is questioning. And as parents and teachers well know, children are the source of unending questions. Hence, child is the first scientist, I replied. There was thunderous applause. The children enjoyed this different way of thinking. Teachers and parents also smiled at the answer. During my visit to Assam, I visited Tezpur. I had gone for the convocation ceremony of Tezpur University and also to receive the honorary doctorate conferred on me. After the convocation, I took off to meet school children. It was a big gathering of young people. The theme of my address was Indomitable Spirit. As soon as I finished my talk, the youngsters mobbed me for autographs. When I finished giving autographs, I faced two interesting questions. One was, why cannot water from the Brahmaputra, which is in flood much of the time, be diverted to Rajasthan or Tamil Nadu, which are starved of water? Only children will have these innovative ideas. Grown-ups tend to see more impossibilities. It was such a powerful question, I was completely beaten. I was sure even the Prime Minister would not have been able to answer it. How to tell the boy, rivers are a state subject and our states are fighting for the rights to their waters. That these would bring them prosperity someday, but meanwhile they were flowing wastefully into the sea and causing floods every year. How to answer it? I said, India Vision 2020 demands from the young that they start a great mission of connecting rivers cutting across the states. I personally feel the young have the most powerful minds. They can overcome the negativity of the bureaucracy and some self-centered policies of the state governments to enrich the people of the country. They can even improve coordination between the states and the center. And they surely will. Another student asked me a question for which again I had no ready answer. He said, "Sir, big leaders in any field don't come and talk to us. We see our Prime Minister often going to Chennai, Lucknow, and many places. But he never comes here. We want him, we want to talk to him." I was impressed by this urge to communicate with the country's leaders. I said, "When I reach Delhi, I will tell your dream to the leaders and your dream will come true." I later narrated this to the Prime Minister. He conceded the point and said, "Children don't talk to me anymore. Maybe the security cordon has created a separation." I request our leaders in different fields to interact more with the children of the country for a better understanding of their own purpose in life, as also for helping create a better future for our children. I have visited Jharkhand a number of times after its formation. Every time I visit it, I am struck by the tremendous resources that wait to be harnessed in the state, which will multiply its wealth manifold. At the Sri Ramakrishna High School, Bokaro, I addressed a gathering of about 3,000 students and saw their creativity on display in an exhibition of their paintings, toys and other items made by them. In my conversation with them, one student asked me, "In Jharkhand, it is green everywhere. We have forests, streams and hills. Why is it that we have a desert in Rajasthan?" The question reminded me of a similar one in Assam. Why cannot the Brahmaputra's waters be taken to Tamil Nadu and Rajasthan? 20 years ago, you would not have seen much cultivation in Rajasthan. But once the Indira Gandhi Canal was constructed, agriculture became possible in many places. It is possible for man to transform the desert into a fertile land. I repeated what I had told the student in Assam. It has to be one of the greatest missions of India to connect rivers so that water can reach many water-starved states. Visionary action is needed. When you grow up you will probably be part of reconstructing this nation and giving shape to these thoughts. One child came to me with a serious expression and asked, "Sir, will your Agni missile cross the ocean and reach America?" I was a little startled by this thought. For us no country is our enemy to send Agni there. Particularly America is our friend. Agni symbolizes our strength. It shows that India has all the capabilities. During my visit to Cuttack I participated in the birthday celebrations of the late Justice Hari R. Mahapatra. I went there at the invitation of Justice Ranganath Mishra. For me, it was a revelation, how the independence movement, the first vision for the nation, had created the larger-than-life figure of Justice Hari R. Mahapatra. He lived to the age of 92 and established Cuttack Eye Hospital, Utkal University and above all organized multi-pronged efforts to remove poverty. My biography in Oriya was released. At the end of my speech the youngsters crowding around put forth many questions. The first question was, "Sir, tell us which are your favorite books, that you loved and which have shaped your mind?" I said, 4 books in my life have been very close to my heart. I cherish reading them. The first is Man the Unknown by Dr. Alexis Carrel, a doctor turned philosopher and a Nobel laureate. This book highlights how the mind and body both have to be treated in an ailment as the two are integrated. You cannot treat one and ignore the other. In particular, children who dream of becoming doctors should read the book. They will learn that the human body is not a mechanical system, it is a very intelligent organism with a most intricate and sensitive feedback system. The second book, one I venerate, is Tyru Vluver's Thrukural, which provides an excellent code of life. The third is Light from Many Lamps by Lillian Eichler Watson, which has touched me deeply. It illuminates how we live and has been an invaluable guide to me for 50 years. And the Holy Quran is, of course, a constant companion. While I was addressing another gathering of school children in Anand, Gujarat, one smart boy asked a very intelligent question, "Who is our enemy?" I liked the question and put it to the other students, encouraging them to come forward with their views. Then came the answer, poverty. What a wise reaction from this young child whom I have mentioned in the dedication. The last question, which I am including here, came from the powerful mind of another child. "Tell me, sir, are Pakistani weapons stronger than Indian ones?" I asked the child why this doubt arose in his mind. Reports he read in the media led him to think so, he said. This is a unique characteristic of our country to belittle our capabilities. It may even be genetic. I said. India can design, develop and produce any type of missile and any type of nuclear weapon. This is a capability only 4 countries in the world have. You remove all the doubts from your mind, I told the child, who gave me a very satisfied look. I have selected only 11 questions here from among the hundreds of questions I have been asked during the course of meeting 40,000 high school students so far. The questions reflect the children's innocence, but most of all they show how strongly they feel the desire to live in a strong and prosperous nation. I also realized from these sessions how important it is for them to have role models, whether in science, industry, sports, entertainment or some other field. The question is, can we give our children a role model? And how? At the dawn of the new millennium came the news that the human genome had been decoded. All the 30,000 genes that human beings carry today, we are told, are identical to those of our Stone Age ancestors who lived thousands of years ago. One of the traits that has come down to us from them, along with others that are needed for survival, is the desire for achievement. It is said that nature gave us this instinct because the need to achieve, like the need to reproduce, the need to eat, the need to drink and the need to breathe, is simply too important to be left to chance. History shows the hunger for achievement is a highly evolved one and undoubtedly the strongest one. We tend to forget it, but it underlines much of our experience. Most important, without it, how would we learn and grow, aspire to greater perfection? I have seen Dr. Vikram Sarabhai's vision succeeding over 3 decades through sustained and coordinated achievement. At work in that and any other endeavor was this same desire to exceed the limits. As we try and excel, role models play a guiding role. The power of Vikram Sarabhai was such that others took up his vision and completed it long after he was no more. For you it could be someone else whom you admire, a sports person, a teacher, a successful entrepreneur. I recently had the chance to meet a legendary personality, a role model herself. Lata Mangeshkar was presiding over a function in remembrance of her father, Master Dinanath Mangeshkar. Lata Mangeshkar is a recipient of the Bharat Ratna, and I felt honored that she had asked me to inaugurate the 450-bed Dinanath Hospital and Research Center in Pune. I visited the hospital just before the inauguration. I found that it would be treating nearly 30% of the patients free. I was touched by the fact that despite her wealth and fame, she had not lost sight of the fact that one needs to do all one can to help relieve the suffering of others. Her songs played over the radio have brought pleasure to countless hearts over the decades. During the India-China conflict in 1962, her song Amir Vatan Klogo moved an entire nation. Few people can claim to have influenced the lives of millions in such a delightful way. Role models can help us focus on what is correct for us as individuals, as groups and, of course, as a nation. They can also lead us to great success. We seem to have got carried away with the success of a few in the field of information technology. But that is indeed nothing compared to what we can and should achieve. Ancient India was a knowledge society and a leader in many intellectual pursuits, particularly in the fields of mathematics, medicine and astronomy. A renaissance is imperative for us to once again become a knowledge superpower rather than simply providing cheap labor in areas of high technology. Summary: a nation's wealth is the young generation of the country. When they grow up, who can be the role models? Mother, father and elementary school teachers play a very important part as role models. When the child grows up, the role models will be national leaders of quality and integrity in every field including politics, the sciences, technology and industry. 3 visionary teachers and scientists. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power and magic in it. Begin it now. Gouda, the great minds of the country, had the ability to make others join their endeavor to convert dreams into reality. For them, the nation was bigger than themselves and they could draw thousands to act upon their dreams. In December 2000, I had participated in the birth centenary celebrations of Adhyapaka Rathna Titodadri Iyengar. I graduated in science from St. Joseph. Wings of Fire. An autobiography of Upakir Jainuddin Abdul Kalam has come to personally represent to many of his countrymen the best aspects of Indian life. Born in 1931, the son of a little educated boattowner in Rains War, Tamil Nadu, he had an unparalleled career as a defense scientist, culminating in the highest civilian award of India, the Bharat Ratna. As chief of the country's defense research and development program, Kalam demonstrated the great potential for dynamism and innovation that existed in seemingly moribund research establishments. This is the story of Kalam's rise from obscurity and his personal and professional struggles, as well as the story of Agni, Prithvi, Akash, Trishula and Dinag, missiles that have become household names in India and that have raised the nation to the level of a missile power of international reckoning. At the same time as he has helped create India's awesome weaponry, Kalam has maintained the ascetic rigor of his personal life, working 18 hours a day and practicing the Veena. With characteristic modesty, Kalam ascribes the greatness of his achievement to the influence of his teachers and mentors. He describes the struggles of his boyhood and youth, bringing alive everyday life in a small town in South India and the inspirational role of educators. He describes the role of visionary Indian scientists, such as Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, and of the creation of a coordinated network of research institutions. This is also the saga of independent India's struggle for technological self-sufficiency and defensive autonomy, a story as much about politics, domestic and international, as it is about science. Arun Tiwari worked under Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam for over a decade in the Defense Research and Development Laboratory, DRDL, Hyderabad. He is currently Director, Cardiovascular Technology Institute, Hyderabad, where he is pursuing Dr. Kalam's vision of developing cost-effective medical devices using indigenous defense technology. Dr. Kalam is now India's president. He was elected to India's office by a huge majority in 2002. To the memory of my parents, my mother, sea waves, golden sand, pilgrim's faith, rains, worn mosque street, all merge into one, my mother. You come to me like heaven's caring arms. I remember the war days when life was challenge and toil, miles to walk, hours before sunrise, walking to take lessons from the saintly teacher near the temple. Again miles to the Arab teaching school, climb sandy hills to railway station road, collect, distribute newspapers to temple city citizens. Few hours after sunrise, going to school. Evening, business time before study at night. All this pain of a young boy, my mother, you transformed into pious strength with kneeling and bowing 5 times for the grace of the Almighty only, my mother. Your strong piety is your children's strength. You always shared your best with whoever needed the most. You always gave, and gave with faith in him. I still remember the day when I was 10, sleeping on your lap to the envy of my elder brothers and sisters. It was full moon night, my world only you knew, mother. My mother. When at midnight I woke with tears falling on my knee, you knew the pain of your child, my mother. Your caring hands, tenderly removing the pain, your love, your care, your faith give me strength to face the world without fear and with his strength. We will meet again on the great judgment day, my mother. APJ Abdul Kalam. Contents: Preface, Acknowledgements, Introduction, Orientation, Creation, Propitiation, Contemplation, Epilogue. Preface. I have worked under Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam for over a decade. This might seem to disqualify me as his biographer, and I certainly had no notion of being one. One day, while speaking to him, I asked him if he had a message for young Indians. His message fascinated me. Later, I mustered the courage to ask him about his recollections so that I could pen them down before they were buried irretrievably under the sands of time. We had a long series of sittings late into the night and early under the fading stars of dawn, all somehow stolen from his very busy schedule of 18 hours a day. The profundity and range of his ideas mesmerized me. He had tremendous vitality and obviously received immense pleasure from the world of ideas. His conversation was not always easy to follow, but was always fresh and stimulating. There were complexities, subtleties, and intriguing metaphors and subplots in his narrative, but gradually the unfolding of his brilliant mind took the form of a continuous discourse. When I sat down to write this book, I felt that it required greater skills than I possessed. But realizing the importance of this task and regarding it an honor to have been permitted to attempt it, I prayed earnestly for the courage and caliber to complete it. This book is written for the ordinary people of India for whom Dr. Kalam has an immense affection, and of whom Dr. Kalam is certainly one. He has an intuitive rapport with the humblest and simplest people, an indication of his own simplicity and innate spirituality. For myself, writing this book has been like a pilgrimage. Through Dr. Kalam, I was blessed with the revelation that the real joy of living can be found in only one way, in one's communion with an eternal source of hidden knowledge within oneself, which each individual is bidden to seek and find for himself or herself. Many of you may never meet Dr. Kalam in person, but I hope you will enjoy his company through this book, and that he will become your spiritual friend. I could include in this book only a few incidents among the many narrated to me by Dr. Kalam. In fact, this book provides only a thumbnail sketch of Dr. Kalam's life. It is quite possible that certain important incidents have been inadvertently dropped and that the contribution of some individuals to the projects coordinated by Dr. Kalam has gone unrecorded. Since a quarter-century of professional life separates me from Dr. Kalam, some important issues might also have remained unrecorded or have been distorted. I am solely responsible for such shortcomings, which are, of course, completely unintentional. At Irantawari Acknowledgements Introduction, I wish to express my gratitude to all the people involved in the writing of this book, especially Mr. Rajan, Mr. Reshavitinu Pillai, Mr. Aranaga Agarwal, Mr. Pralada, Mr. KVSS Prasada Rao and Dr. S.K. Salwan, who were very generous in sharing their time and knowledge with me. I am thankful to Professor Kav Pandalai and Mr. R. Swaminathan for critical reviews of the text. I thank Dr. B. Soma Raju for his tangible, but always unspoken support for this project. My sincere thanks go to my wife and unsparing critic, Dr. Anjana Tiwari, for her tough comments, accompanied with her gentle support. It has been a pleasure to work with Universities Press, and the cooperation of the editorial and production staff is much appreciated. There are many fine people, such as the photographer Mr. Prabhu, who have selflessly enriched me and this book in ways beyond measure. I thank them all. And finally, my deepest gratitude to my sons, A.C. Mendimal, for their unfailing emotional support during the writing, and because I seek in them that attitude towards life which Dr. Kalam admired, and wanted this work to reflect. At Tiwari, this book is being released at a time when India's technological endeavors, to assert its sovereignty and strengthen its security, are questioned by many in the world. Historically, people have always fought among themselves on one issue or another. Prehistorically, battles were fought over food and shelter. With the passage of time, wars were waged over religious and ideological beliefs, and now the dominant struggle of sophisticated warfare is for economic and technological supremacy. Consequently, economic and technological supremacy is equated with political power and world control. A few nations who have grown very strong technologically, over the past few centuries, have wrested control, for their own purposes. These major powers have become the self-proclaimed leaders of the New World Order. What does a country of 1 billion people, like India, do in such a situation? We have no other option but to be technologically strong. But, can India be a leader in the field of technology? My answer is an emphatic yes. And let me validate my answer by narrating some incidents from my life. When I first began the reminiscences that have gone into this book, I was uncertain about which of my memories were worth narrating or were of any relevance at all. My childhood is precious to me, but would it be of interest to anyone else? Was it worth the reader's while, I wondered, to know about the tribulations and triumphs of a small-town boy? Of the straitened circumstances of my school days, the odd jobs I did to pay my school fees, and how my decision to become a vegetarian was partly due to my financial GPY constraints as a college student. Why should these be of any interest to the general public? In the end, I was convinced that these were relevant, if not for anything else but because they tell something of the story of modern India, as individual destiny and the social matrix in which it is embedded cannot be seen in isolation. Having been persuaded of this, it did seem germane to include the accounts of my frustrated attempt to become an Air Force pilot and of how I became, instead of the collector my father dreamed I would be, a rocket engineer. Finally, I decided to describe the individuals who had a profound influence on my life. This book is also by way of a submission of thanks, therefore, to my parents and immediate family, and to the teachers and preceptors I was fortunate to have had, both as a student and in my professional life. It is also a tribute to the unflagging enthusiasm and efforts of my young colleagues who helped to realize our collective dreams. The famous words of Isaac Newton about standing on the shoulders of giants are valid for every scientist, and I certainly owe a great debt of knowledge and inspiration to the distinguished lineage of Indian scientists, that included Vikram Sarabhai, Satish Dhawan, and Brahm Prakash. They played major roles in my life and in the story of Indian science. I completed 60 years of age on October 15, 1991. I had decided to devote my retirement to fulfilling what I saw as my duties in the sphere of social service. Instead, two things happened simultaneously. First, I agreed to continue in government service for another 3 years, and, next, a young colleague, Arun Tiwari, requested me to share my reminiscences with him, so that he could record them. He was someone who had been working in my laboratory since 1982, but I had never really known him well until the February of 1987 when I visited him at the Intensive Coronary Care Unit of the Nizam's Institute of Medical Sciences in Hyderabad. He was a mere 32 years old, but was fighting valiantly for his life. I asked him if there was anything he wanted me to do for him. "Give me your blessings, sir," he said, "so that I may have a longer life and can complete at least one of your projects." The young man's dedication moved me and I prayed for his recovery all night. The Lord answered my prayers and Tiwari was able to get back to work in a month. He did an excellent job in helping to realize the Akash missile airframe from scratch within the short space of 3 years. He then took up the task of chronicling my story. Over the last year, he patiently transcribed the bits and pieces of my story and converted them into a fluent narrative. He also went through my personal library meticulously and selected from among the pieces of poetry those that I had marked while reading, and included them in the text. This story is an account, I hope, not just of my personal triumphs and tribulations but of the successes and setbacks of the science establishment in modern India, struggling to establish itself in the technological forefront. It is the story of national aspiration and of cooperative endeavor. And, as I see it, the saga of India's search for scientific self-sufficiency and technological competence is a parable for our times. Each individual creature on this beautiful planet is created by God to fulfill a particular role. Whatever I have achieved in life is through His help, and an expression of His will. He showered His grace on me through some outstanding teachers and colleagues, and when I pay my tributes to these fine persons, I am merely praising His glory. All these rockets and missiles are His work through a small person called Kalam, in order to tell the several million mass of India, to never feel small or helpless. We are all born with a divine fire in us. Our efforts should be to give wings to this fire and fill the world with the glow of its goodness. May God bless you. APJ Abdul Kalam. My orientation, 1931 to 1963, this earth is His, to Him belong those vast and boundless skies, both seas within Him rest, and yet in that small pool He lies. Athar Vavda Book 4, Hymn 16. 1. I was born into a middle-class Tamil family in the island town of Rameswaram in the erstwhile Madras state. My father, Jainuddin, had neither much formal education nor much wealth. Despite these disadvantages, he possessed great innate wisdom and a true generosity of spirit. He had an ideal helpmate in my mother, Ashiyama. I do not recall the exact number of people she fed every day, but I am quite certain that far more outsiders ate with us than all the members of our own family put together. My parents were widely regarded as an ideal couple. My mother's lineage was the more distinguished, one of her forebears having been bestowed the title of Bahadur by the British. I was one of many children, a short boy with rather undistinguished looks, born to tall and handsome parents. We lived in our ancestral house, which was built in the middle of the 19th century. It was a fairly large pucca house, made of limestone and brick, on the Mosque Street in Rameswaram. My austere father used to avoid all inessential comforts and luxuries. However, all necessities were provided for, in terms of food, medicine or clothes. In fact, I would say mine was a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. I normally ate with my mother, sitting on the floor of the kitchen. She would place a banana leaf before me, on which she then ladled rice and aromatic sambar, a variety of sharp, homemade pickles and a dollop of fresh coconut chutney. The famous Shiva temple, which made Rameswaram so sacred to pilgrims, was about a 10-minute walk from our house. Our locality was predominantly Muslim, but there were quite a few Hindu families too, living amicably with their Muslim neighbors. There was a very old mosque in our locality where my father would take me for evening prayers. I had not the faintest idea of the meaning of the Arabic prayers chanted, but I was totally convinced that they reached God. When my father came out of the mosque after the prayers, people of different religions would be sitting outside, waiting for him. Many of them offered bowls of water to my father, who would dip his fingertips in them and say a prayer. This water was then carried home for invalids. I also remember people visiting our home to offer thanks after being cured. My father always smiled and asked them to thank Allah, the benevolent and merciful. The high priest of Rameswaram temple, Pakshi Lakshmana Sastri, was a very close friend of my father's. One of the most vivid memories of my early childhood is of the two men, each in his traditional attire, discussing spiritual matters. When I was old enough to ask questions, I asked my father about the relevance of prayer. My father told me there was nothing mysterious about prayer. Rather, prayer made possible a communion of the Spirit between people. When you pray, he said, you transcend your body and become a part of the cosmos, which knows no division of wealth, age, caste, or creed. My father could convey complex spiritual concepts in very simple, down-to-earth style. He once told me, in his own time, in his own place, in what he really is, and in the stage he has reached, good or bad, every human being is a specific element within the whole of the manifest divine being. So why be afraid of difficulties, sufferings and problems? When troubles come, try to understand the relevance of your sufferings. Adversity always presents opportunities for introspection. Why don't you say this to the people who come to you for help and advice? I asked my father. He put his hands on my shoulders and looked straight into my eyes. For quite some time he said nothing, as if he was judging my capacity to comprehend his words. Then he answered in a low, deep voice. His answer filled me with a strange energy and enthusiasm. Whenever human beings find themselves alone, as a natural reaction, they start looking for company. Whenever they are in trouble, they look for someone to help them. Whenever they reach an impasse, they look to someone to show them the way out. Every recurrent anguish, longing, and desire finds its own special helper. For the people who come to me in distress, I am but a go-between in their effort to propitiate demonic forces with prayers and offerings. This is not a correct approach at all and should never be followed. One must understand the difference between a fear-ridden vision of destiny and the vision that enables us to seek the enemy of fulfillment within ourselves. I remember my father starting his day at 4 a.m. by reading the namaz before dawn. After the namaz, he used to walk down to a small coconut grove we own, about 4 miles from our home. He would return, with about a dozen coconuts tied together thrown over his shoulder, and only then would he have his breakfast. This remained his routine even when he was in his late 60s. I have throughout my life tried to emulate my father in my own world of science and technology. I have endeavored to understand the fundamental truths revealed to me by my father, and feel convinced that there exists a divine power that can lift one up from confusion, misery, melancholy and failure, and guide one to one's true place. And once an individual severs his emotional and physical bondage, he is on the road to freedom, happiness and peace of mind. I was about 6 years old when my father embarked on the project of building a wooden sailboat to take pilgrims from Rameswaram to Dhanushkodi, also called Sedthukai Rai, and back. He worked at building the boat on the seashore, with the help of a relative, Ahmed Jalaluddin, who later married my sister, Zohara. I watched the boat take shape. The wooden hull and bulkheads were seasoned with the heat from wood fires. My father was doing good business with the boat when, one day, a cyclone bringing winds of over 100 miles per hour carried away our boat, along with some of the landmass of Sedthukai Rai. The Pamban Bridge collapsed with a train full of passengers on it. Until then, I had only seen the beauty of the sea, now its uncontrollable energy came as a revelation to me. By the time the boat met its untimely end, Ahmed Jalaluddin had become a close friend of mine, despite the difference in our ages. He was about 15 years older than I and used to call me Azad. We used to go for long walks together every evening. As we started from Mosque Street and made our way towards the sandy shores of the island, Jalaluddin and I talked mainly of spiritual matters. The atmosphere of Rameswaram, with its flocking pilgrims, was conducive to such discussion. Our first halt would be at the imposing temple of Lord Shiva. Circling around the temple with the same relevance as any pilgrim from a distant part of the country, we felt a flow of energy pass through us. Jalaluddin would talk about God as if he had a working partnership with him. He would present all his doubts to God as if he were standing nearby to dispose of them. I would stare at Jalaluddin and then look towards the large groups of pilgrims around the temple, taking holy dips in the sea, performing rituals and reciting prayers with a sense of respect towards the same unknown, whom we treat as the formless Almighty. I never doubted that the prayers in the temple reached the same destination as the ones offered in our mosque. I only wondered whether Jalaluddin had any other special connection to God. Jalaluddin's schooling had been limited, principally because of his family's straitened circumstances. This may have been the reason why he always encouraged me to excel in my studies and enjoyed my success vicariously. Never did I find the slightest trace of resentment in Jalaluddin for his deprivation. Rather, he was always full of gratitude for whatever life had chosen to give him. Incidentally, at the time I speak of, he was the only person on the entire island who could write English. He wrote letters for almost anybody in need, be they letters of application or otherwise. Nobody of my acquaintance, either in my family or in the neighborhood, even had Jalaluddin's level of education or any links of consequence with the outside world. Jalaluddin always spoke to me about educated people, of scientific discoveries, of contemporary literature, and of the achievements of medical science. It was he who made me aware of a brave, new world beyond our narrow confines. In the humble environs of my boyhood, books were a scarce commodity. By local standards, however, the personal library of S.T.R. Manikam, a former revolutionary or militant nationalist, was sizable. He encouraged me to read all I could, and I often visited his home to borrow books. Another person who greatly influenced my boyhood was my first cousin, Sam Sutton. He was the sole distributor for newspapers in Rains Wareham. The newspapers would arrive at Rains Wareham station by the morning train from Pamban. Sam Sutton's newspaper agency was a one-man organization catering to the reading demands of the 1,000-strong literate population of Rains Wareham town. These newspapers were mainly bought to keep abreast of current developments in the national independence movement, for astrological reference, or to check the bullion rates prevailing in Madras. A few readers with a more cosmopolitan outlook would discuss Hitler, Mahatma Gandhi and Jinnah. Almost all would finally flow into the mighty political current of Periyar Ramaswamy's movement against high-caste Hindus. Dinamani was the most sought-after newspaper. Since reading the printed matter was beyond my capability, I had to satisfy myself with glancing at the pictures in the newspaper before Sam Sutton delivered them to his customers. The Second World War broke out in 1939, when I was 8 years old. For reasons I have never been able to understand, a sudden demand for tamarind seeds erupted in the market. I used to collect the seeds and sell them to a provision shop on Mosque Street. A day's collection would fetch me the princely sum of 1 anna. Jalaluddin would tell me stories about the war which I would later attempt to trace in the headlines in Dinamani. Our area, being isolated, was completely unaffected by the war. But soon India was forced to join the Allied forces and something like a state of emergency was declared. The first casualty came in the form of the suspension of the train halt at Rains Wareham station. The newspapers now had to be bundled and thrown out from the moving train on the Rains Wareham road between Rains Wareham and Danaskoti. That forced Sam Sutton to look for a helping hand to catch the bundles, and, as if naturally, I filled the slot. Sam Sutton helped me earn my first wages. Half a century later, I can still feel the surge of pride in earning my own money for the first time. Every child is born, with some inherited characteristics, into a specific socio-economic and emotional environment, and trained in certain ways by figures of authority. I inherited honesty and self-discipline from my father, from my mother. I inherited faith in goodness and deep kindness, and so did my 3 brothers and sister. But it was the time I spent with Jalaluddin and Sam Sutton that perhaps contributed most to the uniqueness of my childhood and made all the difference in my later life. The unschooled wisdom of Jalaluddin and Sam Sutton was so intuitive and responsive to non-verbal messages, that I can unhesitatingly attribute my subsequently manifested creativity to their company in my childhood. I had 3 close friends in my childhood, Ramanatha Sastry, Aravindan, and Shivna Prakasan. All these boys were from Orthodox Hindu Brahmin families. As children, none of us ever felt any difference amongst ourselves because of our religious differences and upbringing. In fact, Ramanatha Sastry was the son of Pakshi Lakshmana Sastry, the high priest of the Rains Wareham temple. Later, he took over the priesthood of the Rains Wareham temple from his father. Aravindan went into the business of arranging transport for visiting pilgrims, and Shivna Prakasan became a catering contractor for the Southern Railways. During the annual Shri Sitaram Kalyanam ceremony, Our family used to arrange boats with a special platform for carrying idols of the Lord from the temple to the marriage site, situated in the middle of the pond called Dramatirtha, which was near our house. Events from the Ramayana and from the life of the prophet were the bedtime stories my mother and grandmother would tell the children in our family. One day when I was in the 5th standard at the Rameswaram Elementary School, a new teacher came to our class. I used to wear a cap which marked me as a Muslim, and I always sat in the front row next to Ramanatha Sastry, who wore a sacred thread. The new teacher could not stomach a Hindu priest's son sitting with a Muslim boy. In accordance with our social ranking as the new teacher saw it, I was asked to go and sit on the back bench. I felt very sad, and so did Ramanatha Sastry. He looked utterly downcast as I shifted to my seat in the last row. The image of him weeping when I shifted to the last row left a lasting impression on me. After school, we went home and told our respective parents about the incident. Lakshmana Sastry summoned the teacher, and in our presence, told the teacher that he should not spread the poison of social inequality and communal intolerance in the minds of innocent children. He bluntly asked the teacher to either apologize or quit the school and the island. Not only did the teacher regret his behavior, but the strong sense of conviction Lakshmana Sastry conveyed ultimately reformed this young teacher. On the whole, the small society of Rameswaram was highly stratified and very rigid in terms of the segregation of different social groups. However, my science teacher Shiva Subramania Iyer, though an orthodox Brahmin with a very conservative wife, was something of a rebel. He did his best to break social barriers so that people from varying backgrounds could mingle easily. He used to spend hours with me and would say, "Kalam, I want you to develop so that you are on par with the highly educated people of the big cities." One day, he invited me to his home for a meal. His wife was horrified at the idea of a Muslim boy being invited to dine in her ritually pure kitchen. She refused to serve me in her kitchen. Shiva Subramania Iyer was not perturbed, nor did he get angry with his wife, but instead, served me with his own hands and sat down beside me to eat his meal. His wife watched us from behind the kitchen door. I wondered whether she had observed any difference in the way I ate rice, drank water or cleaned the floor after the meal. When I was leaving his house, Shiva Subramania Iyer invited me to join him for dinner again the next weekend. Observing my hesitation, he told me not to get upset, saying, "Once you decide to change the system, such problems have to be confronted." When I visited his house the next week, Shiva Subramania Iyer's wife took me inside her kitchen and served me food with her own hands. Then the Second World War was over and India's freedom was imminent. "Indians will build their own India," declared Gandhiji. The whole country was filled with an unprecedented optimism. I asked my father's permission to leave Rameswaram and study at the district headquarters in Ramanathapuram. He told me as if thinking aloud, "Abul, I know you have to go away to grow. Does the seagull not fly across the sun, alone and without a nest? You must forego your longing for the land of your memories to move into the dwelling place of your greater desires. Our love will not bind you nor will our needs hold you." He quoted Khalil Gibran to my hesitant mother, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you but not from you. You may give them your love but not your thoughts. For they have their own thoughts." He took me and my 3 brothers to the mosque and recited the prayer Al-Fatiha from the Holy Quran. As he put me on the train at Rameswaram station he said, "This island may be housing your body but not your soul. Your soul dwells in the house of tomorrow which none of us at Rameswaram can visit, not even in our dreams. May God bless you, my child." Samsudin and Ahmed Jalaluddin traveled with me to Ramanathapuram to enroll me in Short High School, and to arrange for my boarding there. Somehow, I did not take to the new setting. The town of Ramanathapuram was a thriving, factious town of some 50,000 people, but the coherence and harmony of Rameswaram was absent. I missed my home and grabbed every opportunity to visit Rameswaram. The pull of educational opportunities at Ramanathapuram was not strong enough to nullify the attraction of poli, a South Indian sweet my mother made. In fact, she used to prepare 12 distinctly different varieties of it, bringing out the flavor of every single ingredient used in the best possible combinations. Despite my homesickness, I was determined to come to terms with the new environment because I knew my father had invested great hopes in my success. My father visualized me as a collector in the making, and I thought it my duty to realize my father's dream, although I desperately missed the familiarity, security and comforts of Rains Warham. Jalaluddin used to speak to me about the power of positive thinking, and I often recalled his words when I felt homesick or dejected. I tried hard to do as he said, which was to strive to control my thoughts and my mind and, through these, to influence my destiny. Ironically, that destiny did not lead me back to Rains Warham, but rather, swept me farther away from the home of my childhood. Once I settled down at the Schwartz High School, Ramanathapuram, the enthusiastic 15-year-old within me re-emerged. My teacher, Ayad Rai Solomon, was an ideal guide for an eager young mind that was yet uncertain of the possibilities and alternatives that lay before it. He made his students feel very comfortable in class with his warm and open-minded attitude. He used to say that a good student could learn more from a bad teacher than a poor student from even a skilled teacher. During my stay at Ramanathapuram, my relationship with him grew beyond that of teacher and pupil. In his company, I learned that one could exercise enormous influence over the events of one's own life. Ayad Rai Solomon used to say, to succeed in life and achieve results, you must understand and master three mighty forces: desire, belief, and expectation. Ayad Rai Solomon, who later became a reverend, taught me that before anything I wanted could happen, I had to desire it intensely and be absolutely certain it would happen. To take an example from my own life, I had been fascinated by the mysteries of the sky and the flight of birds from early childhood. I used to watch cranes and seagulls soar into flight and long to fly. Simple, provincial boy though I was convinced that one day I, too, would soar up into the skies. Indeed, I was the first child from Rains Warham to fly. Ayad Rai Solomon was a great teacher because he instilled in all the children a sense of their own worth. Solomon raised my self-esteem to a high point and convinced me, the son of parents who had not had the benefits of education, that I too could aspire to become whatever I wished. With faith, you can change your destiny, he would say. One day, when I was in the 4th form, my mathematics teacher, Ramakrishna Iyer, was teaching another class. Inadvertently, I wandered into that classroom and in the manner of an old-fashioned despot, Ramakrishna Iyer caught me by the neck and caned me in front of the whole class. Many months later, when I scored full marks in mathematics, he narrated the incident to the entire school at morning assembly. Whomsoever I cane becomes a great man. Take my word, this boy is going to bring glory to his school and to his teachers. His praise quite made up for the earlier humiliation. By the time I completed my education at Schwartz, I was a self-confident boy determined to succeed. The decision to go in for further education was taken without a second thought. To us, in those days, the awareness of the possibilities for a professional education did not exist. Higher education simply meant going to college. The nearest college was at Tiruchirappalli, spelled Trichinopalli those days, and called Trichy for short. In 1950, I arrived at St. Joseph's College, Trichy, to study for the intermediate examination. I was not a bright student in terms of examination grades, but, thanks to my two buddies back in Rains Warham, I had acquired a practical bent of mind. Whenever I returned to Rains Warham from Schwartz, my elder brother Mustafa Kamal, who ran a provision store on the railway station road, would call me in to give him a little help and then vanish for hours together, leaving the shop in my charge. I sold oil, onions, rice and everything else. The fastest moving items, I found, were cigarettes and bitas. I used to wonder what made poor people smoke away their hard-earned money. When spared by Mustafa, I would be put in charge of his kiosk by my younger brother, Qasim Muhammad. There I sold novelties made of seashells. At St. Joseph's, I was lucky to find a teacher like the Reverend Father Tien Sequeira. He taught us English and was also our hostel warden. We were about 100 boys living in the 3-storied hostel building. Reverend Father used to visit each boy every night with a Bible in his hand. His energy and patience was amazing. He was a very considerate person who took care of even the most minute requirements of his students. On Deepavali, on his instructions, the brother in charge of the hostel and the mess volunteers would visit each room and distribute good jingly oil for the ritual bath. I stayed on the St. Joseph's campus for 4 years and shared my room with 2 others. One was an Orthodox Iyengar from the Srirangam and the other a Syrian Christian from Kerala. The 3 of us had a wonderful time together. When I was made secretary of the vegetarian mess during my 3rd year in the hostel, we invited the rector, Reverend Father Kalatil, over for lunch one Sunday. Our menu included the choicest preparations from our diverse backgrounds. The result was rather unexpected, but Reverend Father was lavish in his praise of our efforts. We enjoyed every moment with Reverend Father Kalatil, who participated in our unsophisticated conversation with childlike enthusiasm. It was a memorable event for us all. My teachers at St. Joseph were the true followers of Kanchi Paramakriya, who evoked people to enjoy the action of giving. The vivid memory of our mathematics teachers, Professor Thalthathri Iyengar and Professor Suryanarayana Sastry, walking together on the campus inspires me to this day. When I was in the final year at St. Joseph's, I acquired a taste for English literature. I began to read the great classics, Tolstoy, Scott and Hardy being special favorites despite their exotic settings, and then I moved on to some works in philosophy. It was around this time that I developed a great interest in physics. The lessons on subatomic physics at St. Joseph's by my physics teachers, Professor Chinnadurai and Professor Krishnamurthy, introduced me to the concept of the half-life period in matters related to the radioactive decay of substances. Shiva Subramania Iyer, my science teacher at Rames Warm, had never taught me that most subatomic particles are unstable and that they disintegrate after a certain time into other particles. All this I was learning for the first time. But when he taught me to strive with diligence because decay is inherent in all compounded things, was he not talking of the same thing? I wonder why some people tend to see science as something which takes man away from God. As I look at it, the path of science can always wind through the heart. For me, science has always been the path to spiritual enrichment and self-realization. Even the rational thought matrices of science have been home to fairy tales. I am an avid reader of books on cosmology and enjoy reading about celestial bodies. Many friends, while asking me questions related to space flights, sometimes slip into astrology. Quite honestly, I have never really understood the reason behind the great importance attached by people to the faraway planets in our solar system. As an art, I have nothing against astrology, but if it seeks acceptance under the guise of science, I reject it. I do not know how these myths evolved about planets, star constellations, and even satellites, that they can exercise power on human beings. The highly complicated calculations manipulated around the precise movements of celestial bodies, to derive highly subjective conclusions appear illogical to me. As I see it, the Earth is the most powerful and energetic planet. As John Milton puts it so beautifully in Paradise Lost, Book 8. What if the sun be center to the world, and other stars? The planet Earth, so steadfast though she seem, insensibly 3 different motions move. Wherever you go on this planet, there is movement and life. Even apparently inanimate things like rocks, metal, timber, clay are full of intrinsic movement, with electrons dancing around each nucleus. This motion originates in their response to the confinement imposed on them by the nucleus, by means of electric forces which try to hold them as close as possible. Electrons, just like any individual with a certain amount of energy, detest confinement. The tighter the electrons are held by the nucleus, the higher their orbital velocity will be. In fact, the confinement of electrons in an atom results in enormous velocities of about 1000 km per second. These high velocities make the atom appear a rigid sphere, just as a fast-moving fan appears like a disk. It is very difficult to compress atoms more strongly, thus giving matter its familiar solid aspect. Everything solid, thus, contains much empty space within, and everything stationary contains great movement within. It is as though the great dance of Shiva is being performed on earth during every moment of our existence. When I joined the BSc degree course at St. Joseph's, I was unaware of any other option for higher education. Nor did I have any information about career opportunities available to a student of science. Only after obtaining a BSc did I realize that physics was not my subject. I had to go into engineering to realize my dreams. I could have joined the engineering course long ago, right after finishing my intermediate course. Better late than never, I told myself as I made the detour, applying for admission into the Madras Institute of Technology, MIT, regarded as the crown jewel of technical education in South India at that time. I managed to be on a list of selected candidates, but admission to this prestigious institution was an expensive affair. Around 1,000 rupees was required, and my father could not spare that much money. At that time, my sister, Zohara, stood behind me, mortgaging her gold bangles and chain. I was deeply touched by her determination to see me educated and by her faith in my abilities. I vowed to release her bangles from mortgage with my own earnings. The only way before me to earn money at that point of time was to study hard and get a scholarship. I went ahead at full steam. What fascinated me most at MIT was the sight of 2 decommissioned aircraft displayed there for the demonstration of the various subsystems of flying machines. I felt a strange attraction towards them, and would sit near them long after other students had gone back to the hostel, admiring man's will to fly free in the sky, like a bird. After completing my first year, when I had to opt for a specific branch, I almost spontaneously chose aeronautical engineering. The goal was very clear in my mind now. I was going to fly aircraft. I was convinced of this, despite being aware of my lack of assertiveness, which probably came about because of my humble background. Around this time, I made special efforts to try and communicate with different kinds of people. There were setbacks, disappointments and distractions, but my father's inspiring words anchored me in those periods of nebulous drift. Plate 1a. My father Jainuluddin was not formally educated, but was a man of great wisdom and kindness. B. Pakshi Lakshmana Sastri, a close friend of my father and the head priest of the Rameswaram temple. Plate 2. The locality in which I grew up. A. My house on Mosque Street. B. Thousands of pilgrims from great distances descend on the ancient temple of Lord Shiva. I often assisted my brother Qasim Muhammad in his shop selling artifacts on this street. Plate 3. The old mosque in our locality where my father would take me and my brothers every evening to offer prayers. Plate 4. My brother pointing at the T-square I used while studying engineering. Plate 5. SDR Manikam, Inset, a friend of my brother Mustafa Kamal, had a large collection of books. This is his house, from where I would borrow books while at Rameswaram. Plate 6. A family get-together. Plate 7. The simple surroundings of Schwartz High School, Ramantapuram. The words on the plaque read, "Let not thy winged days be spent in vain. When once gone no gold can buy them back again." Plate 8. My teachers at Schwartz High School, Ayad Rai Solomon, standing, left, and Ramakrishna Iyer, sitting, right. They are the best examples of small-town Indian teachers committed to nurturing talent. He who knows others is learned, but the wise one is the one who knows himself. Learning without wisdom is of no use. In the course of my education at MIT, 3 teachers shaped my thinking. Their combined contributions formed the foundation on which I later built my professional career. These 3 teachers were Professor Sponder, Professor Kampandalai and Professor Narasina Rao. Each one of them had very distinct personalities, but they shared a common impulse, the capacity to feed their students' intellectual hunger by sheer brilliance and untiring zeal. Professor Sponder taught me technical aerodynamics. He was an Austrian with rich practical experience in aeronautical engineering. During the Second World War, he had been captured by the Nazis and imprisoned in a concentration camp. Understandably, he had developed a very strong dislike for Germans. Incidentally, the aeronautical department was headed by a German, Professor Walter Rippenfin. Another well-known professor, Dr. Kurt Tank, was a distinguished aeronautical engineer who had designed the German Focke-Wulf FW-190 single-seater fighter plane, an outstanding combat aircraft of the Second World War. Dr. Tank later joined the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited (HAL) in Bangalore and was responsible for the design of India's first jet fighter, the HF-24 Merit. Notwithstanding these irritants, Professor Sponder preserved his individuality and maintained high professional standards. He was always calm, energetic and in total control of himself. He kept abreast of the latest technologies and expected his students to do the same. I consulted him before opting for aeronautical engineering. He told me that one should never worry about one's future prospects. Instead, it was more important to lay sound foundations, to have sufficient enthusiasm and an accompanying passion for one's chosen field of study. The trouble with Indians, Professor Sponder used to observe, was not that they lacked educational opportunities or industrial infrastructure. The trouble was in their failure to discriminate between disciplines and to rationalize their choices. Why aeronautics? Why not electrical engineering? Why not mechanical engineering? I myself would like to tell all novitiate engineering students that when they choose their specialization, the essential point to consider is whether the choice articulates their inner feelings and aspirations. Professor Kav Pandalai taught me aerostructure design and analysis. He was a cheerful, friendly and enthusiastic teacher, who brought a fresh approach to every year's teaching course. It was Professor Pandalai who opened up the secrets of structural engineering to us. Even today I believe that everyone who has been taught by Professor Pandalai would agree that he was a man of great intellectual integrity and scholarship, but with no trace of arrogance. His students were free to disagree with him on several points in the classroom. Professor Narasina Rao was a mathematician, who taught us theoretical aerodynamics. I still remember his method of teaching fluid dynamics. After attending his classes, I began to prefer mathematical physics to any other subject. Often, I have been told I carry a surgical knife to aeronautical design reviews. If it had not been for Professor Rao's kind and persistent advice on picking up proofs to equations of aerodynamic flow, I would not have acquired this metaphorical tool. Aeronautics is a fascinating subject, containing within it the promise of freedom. The great difference between freedom and escape, between motion and movement, between slide and flow are the secrets of this science. My teachers revealed these truths to me. Through their meticulous teaching, they created within me an excitement about aeronautics. Their intellectual fervor, clarity of thought and passion for perfection helped me to launch into a serious study of fluid dynamics, modes of compressible medium motion, development of shock waves and shock-induced flow separation at increasing speeds, shock stall and shock wave drag. Slowly, a great amalgamation of information took place in my mind. The structural features of aeroplanes began to gain new meanings: biplanes, monoplanes, tailless planes, canard-configured planes, deltoid planes. All these began to assume increasing significance for me. The three teachers, all of them authorities in their different fields, helped me to mold a composite knowledge. My third and last year at MIT was a year of transition and was to have a great impact on my later life. In those days, a new climate of political enlightenment and industrial effort was sweeping across the country. I had to test my belief in God and see if it could fit into the matrix of scientific thinking. The accepted view was that a belief in scientific methods was the only valid approach to knowledge. If so, I wondered, was matter alone the ultimate reality and were spiritual phenomena but a manifestation of matter? Were all ethical values relative, and was sensory perception the only source of knowledge and truth? I wondered about these issues, attempting to sort out the vexing question of scientific temper and my own spiritual interests. The value system in which I had been nurtured was profoundly religious. I had been taught that true reality lay beyond the material world in the spiritual realm, and that knowledge could be obtained only through inner experience. Meanwhile, when I had finished my coursework, I was assigned a project to design a low-level attack aircraft together with 4 other colleagues. I had taken up the responsibility of preparing and drawing the aerodynamic design. My teammates distributed among themselves the tasks of designing the propulsion, structure, control and instrumentation of the aircraft. One day, my design teacher, Professor Srinivasan, then the director of the MIT, reviewed my progress and declared it dismal and disappointing. I offered a dozen excuses for the delay, but none of them impressed Professor Srinivasan. I finally pleaded for a month's time to complete the task. The professor looked at me for some time and said, "Look, young man, today is Friday afternoon. I give you 3 days' time. If by Monday morning I don't get the configuration drawing, your scholarship will be stopped." I was dumbstruck. The scholarship was my lifeline and I would be quite helpless if it was withdrawn. I could see no other way out but to finish the task as I had been instructed. That night, I remained at the drawing board, skipping dinner. Next morning, I took only an hour's break to freshen up and eat a little food. On Sunday morning, I was very near completion, when suddenly I felt someone else's presence in the room. Professor Srinivasan was watching me from a distance. Coming straight from the gymkhana, he was still in his tennis outfit and had dropped in to see my progress. After examining my work, Professor Srinivasan hugged me affectionately and patted my back in appreciation. He said, "I knew I was putting you under stress and asking you to meet an impossible deadline." Currently, a full appreciation of how problem gaming impacts the daily lives of gamers is lacking. This study aims to gain a more holistic understanding of the activities in the daily lives of problem gamers, particularly, what is important to them, what motivates gaming, and what supports, constraints engagement in other life activities. Semi-structured interviews and week-long activity logs were used to collect data from the 16 problem gamers in 5 countries. Qualitative data were analyzed thematically. 2 main themes emerged. First, gaming was found to be a meaningful and purposeful activity. Participants in this study understood what activities offered them a sense of meaning and personal growth. Video gaming offered both positive and negative experiences in gamers' lives. The negative experiences mainly resulted from using video games as a coping strategy for other life stressors. Second, individual, interpersonal, and environmental influences acted simultaneously to push and pull on the amount of gaming. The push and pull influences on the amount of gaming can occur in real life or virtually. Assistance for problem gamers could include minimizing, removing the pull forces and obtaining adequate push forces to enable their desired participation in daily activities. Previous article in issue. Next article in issue. Keywords: video games, computer games, social ecology, addictive behavior, gaming disorder. Qualitative research. 1. Introduction. The popularity of playing video games has grown immensely over the past decade. Approximately half of Americans play video games on various electronic devices, while 10% of those who play self-identify as being a gamer, someone who consistently plays video games and identifies with the gaming community. Pew Research Center, 2016. A growing body of research has found positive uses for video games. Ferguson, 2010, including reducing flashbacks from post-traumatic stress disorder. Holmes, James, Kudbait, and DePros, 2009, reducing chronic pain. Jones, Moore, and Chu, 2016, and training of healthcare professionals. Wang, De Maria, Goldberg, and Katz, 2016. They have also been found to support student learning by stimulating their engagement in field observations. Huang and Chen, 2017, improve visual spatial cognition. Spence and Feng, 2010, arithmetic, memorization, leadership, and team functioning. Thirunarayanan and Vilches, 2012. However, it is also known that problems may arise when video game playing is excessive. In Canada, a survey study using the problematic video game playing scale, Tijiro Salguero and Moran, 2002, found that 9.4% of adolescent gamers experience problematic gaming, with 1.9% being described as having severe problems. Faulkner, Irving, Luff, and Turner, 2014, Turner et al., 2012. Although there is an ongoing debate regarding the inclusion of gaming disorder in the ICD-11, Van Rouge et al., 2018, It is generally understood that problem gaming is not necessarily addictive gaming. Problem gaming can be defined as a persistent and recurrent involvement in video gaming that results in psychological distress and functional impairment. American Psychiatric Association, 2013, Shapira et al., 2003. Recent longitudinal studies demonstrated conflicting views of the stability of problem video gaming. A 3-year longitudinal study conducted among adolescents in Sweden found problem gaming to be relatively stable over time. Vadlin, Östlund, and Nielsen, 2018. A 5-year longitudinal study among adults in Canada had contradicting findings from Vadlin et al., 2018, where it found problem gaming be transient for most gamers. Theich, Wooden, Hodgins, and Williams, 2015. Furthermore, a correlational panel study of German adolescents also found that excessive gaming is often episodic in that it may appear and disappear quickly from one's life. Rothman, Klimt, and Gallwitzer, 2016. Gamers have been found to play for a variety of reasons. In a qualitative study, Snodgrass et al., 2014, found problematic play was a response to life stress where using video games excessively was a diversion that lead to problem. In a survey of non-problem_spell_merc_gamers, Yi, 2006, found 3 overarching motivations: achievement, immersion, and a social component. Other studies with a small percentage of problem gamers found escapism, coping, mechanics, a social component, experiencing fantasy, and obtaining in-game wealth. Achievements were motivations to gaming. King, Hurd, and Del Fabro, 2018. Kuss, and Weirs, 2012, Lakhani, Pyers, and Chabrol, 2017. Although several studies have examined gaming motivations, few have intentionally sampled only problem gamers to obtain first-hand accounts. 1.1. Gaming as occupation and impact on function. Occupations are everyday activities that people engage in that bring meaning and purpose to life. World Federation of Occupational Therapists, 2016. Humans are naturally occupational beings who need to use time in a meaningful and purposeful way. Wilcock, 1993. These activities contribute to identity, motivation, and routines. Wasmuth, Crabtree, and Scott, 2014. The activity of gaming has been described by gamers as fun and meaningful activity. Rogers, Woolley, Sherrick, Bowman, and Oliver, 2017. It is particularly important to have activities in life that offer choice and control to prevent occupational deprivation, or boredom. Townsend and Politajko, 2013, pages 71 to 80. Boredom is a lack of engagement in meaningful activity and consequently a lack of function. Function is described as a feature of gaming disorder in the ICD-11 and the DSM-V, APA, 2013, World Health Organization, 2017. The importance of functional impairment has also been highlighted in recent debates regarding the disorder. Bex et al., 2017. Studies have demonstrated that functional impairment is present in problem gamers. Functional impairment was also emphasized by gamers in a mixed methods study conducted at a video game convention in the USA, in which gamers agreed that functional impairment was the top sign of problematic gaming. Kolder-Kers et al., 2018. Among the functional issues reported were neglecting their own needs, responsibilities, and a loss of interest in previous hobbies, activities. Kolder-Kers et al., 2018. Several other studies have identified productivity issues at work and school. Cole and Griffiths, 2007, Gentile, Lynch, Linter, and Walsh, 2004, Hastings et al., 2009, Hellstrom, Nielsen, Leppert, and Slund, 2012. Although the implications of functional impairment in activities relating to gamers' lives have some very practical repercussions and are directly related to well-being, directly addressing function through the examination of daily activities has generally not been the focus of research studies. 1.2. Thematic anchors and study aims. Qualitative research focuses on obtaining an in-depth understanding of a specific set of experiences within real-world contexts. Gresswell, 2009, Mays and Pope, 2000. Hence, the social-ecological model as a guiding model for this study demonstrates excellent compatibility with a pragmatism worldview that was used to guide this study. The social-ecological model provides a holistic conceptual framework that human behaviors, environmental conditions, and well-being are interrelated. Stickles, 1996. Applied to problem gaming, it proposes that the forces underlying the problem are not solely based in the individual gamer but also on the interrelationships between the gamer and her surroundings. Examining factors outside of the individual found reciprocal relationships within family dynamics where poorer parental relationships were associated with increased problem gaming and long-term problem gaming had negative effects on the family. Schneider, King, and Del Fabro, 2017. Furthermore, a systematic review of longitudinal trends with those who experienced Internet use and problematic Internet use examined issues occurring at the individual, peer, family, and classroom levels. Anderson, Steen, and Stavropoulos, 2017. This study found an interplay between these internal and contextual factors that moderate an individual's engagement in Internet use. However, such studies group gaming with other Internet-related activities such as social media use and online gambling. Snodgrass et al. 2014, used a culturally sensitive approach that found that problem gaming is on a continuum with positive play experiences. The social and environmental forces associated with problem video gaming need to be considered in combination with individual ones to reveal a more complex picture of problem video gaming that the current literature has not yet captured. Currently, a full appreciation of how problem gaming impacts the daily lives of gamers is lacking. Moreover, there has been a lack of studies that focus on functional activities and aim to examine first-hand accounts from problem gamers without bias from non-problem gamers. The aim of this study is to gain a more complex understanding of the activities in the daily lives of problem video gamers, particularly, 1. What activities are important to them? 2. What motivates gaming? 3. What supports, constraints to engagement they experience in other life activities? 2. Method. This study employed a qualitative thematic approach using semi-structured interview and activity logs. The themes arose from the data collected about the experiences of PGs, Boetsis, 1998. Ethical approval was obtained at authors' institutions. Participants were recruited through recruitment posters posted throughout a mental health center serving a large geographical area, and advertisements on a stakeholder listserv, online gaming treatment websites, and gaming-related forums. Snowball sampling was used, Noy, 2008. Interested participants were included if they were people who played video games, were at least 16 years old, scored 5 or more out of 9 questions on the problem video game playing scale, PvP, Tijiro Salguero and Moran, 2002, did not play mostly gambling games, and did not play games professionally, train with professional gamers. A score of more than 5 on the PvP indicates the presence of problem gaming. Cronbach's alpha at 0.69, Tijiro Salguero and Moran, 2002. Informed consent was obtained from the participants prior to each interview. Eligible participants were asked to keep a daily activity log on an hourly basis for 1 week. Appendix A. Activity logs are a method to examine daily activity patterns and help individuals be more aware of how time is spent. Willard and Skell, 2014, p. 170. They were used to help increase the accuracy of self-reporting and for comparing participants' perceptions of their time used to what they were actually doing. The logs also helped provide additional insights into their daily lives and stimulate discussion during the interview. Participants were asked to bring or email their logs to the interviewer for the day of the interview. Semi-structured interviews and probes were used to understand the experiences of PGs. The semi-structured interviews were approximately 1 hour long. They were conducted either in person, by phone, by Skype video, or by Skype audio only. Appendix B for interview questions. The interviewer, first author, attempted to bracket prior experience with video games during the interviews by allowing participants to expand on their description of gaming-related features and used probing questions to facilitate detailed descriptions from the participants. Interviews and data analysis were conducted concurrently through an iterative process. Interview questions were modified as data were collected to gain a better understanding of gamers' lives. Merriam and Tistel, 2015. Data collection through interviews continued until theoretical saturation was reached. This took place between December 2016 to June 2017. 2.1. Data analysis and rigor. Audio recorded interviews were transcribed verbatim by the first author and analyzed thematically using methods suggested by Braun and Clark, 2006. Thematic analysis is particularly useful at investigating new, underexplored areas, or participant perspectives that are yet to be uncovered. Braun and Clark, 2006. It is also a useful method to gain a rich understanding of people's experiences. Data analysis was inductive in that themes were created from the codes and that categories emerged from the data. This was a systematic process of organizing and presenting data in ways that allowed the identification of connections, patterns, and categories. Bogdan and Bikulan, 2003. Computer-aided qualitative data management software NVivo, version 11, 2015 by QSR International Proprietary Limited was used. The first author and the last author individually coded 2 transcripts to support data analysis and triangulation. The first author coded all remaining transcripts. The interviews, together with the logs, are a form of methods triangulation where findings are generated by different data collection methods. Merriam and Tistel, 2015. Finally, reflexive memos and analytic notes were taken after interviews and during the transcribing phase. Reflections and analytic thoughts were also discussed with colleagues throughout the research process. 2.2. Participant characteristics. 16 participants, 11 male, 5 female, aged 16 to 35 years old were interviewed for this study. Their mean score on the PVP was 7 out of 9. According to their activity logs, the participants played a mean of 30.85 h of video games per week, ranging from 10 each to 62.5 h per week. 3 people did not fully complete the activity log and were excluded from the calculations. However, actual gaming hours may have been higher due to interview reports that 1. They were gaming while performing other activities, 2. Missing data in logs may have been time spent gaming, and 3. 2 participants were traveling during the time of log completion, so it was not a typical week. Furthermore, time spent on other gaming-related activities that did not involve physical gameplay from the participants were also not included in the mean hours per week calculation. These gaming-related activities included 1. Watching others play via live streams, 2. Reading strategy guides, 3. Reading fan fiction, 4. Thinking about games, and 5. Building a computer. Table 1 provides a summary of participant characteristics. Table 1. Participant characteristics. Participant characteristic N equals 16 Country of participant Canada 7 USA 6 Peru 1 Trinidad and Tobago 1 Japan 1 Mode of interview in person 4 Skype video 8 Skype audio only 3 Phone 1 Vocation School 7 Work Bait Unemployed 1 A full-time or part-time school, secondary education or higher. Some students also worked part-time hours. B full-time or part-time work. 3. Findings 2 main themes emerged from interviewed data analysis, gaming as meaningful and purposeful and push-pull influences on the amount of gaming, each with sub-themes. Table 2. The first theme pertains to the meaning, purpose, and roles that gaming serves in a person's life. The second theme describes different forces that influence decision-making about engaging in gaming versus other activities in life. Verbatim quotes from interviews are presented to support the themes. Pseudonyms are used to preserve anonymity of participants. Table 2. Summary of themes and sub-themes. Themes, sub-themes, description. Gaming as meaningful and purposeful. Gaming as a part of life. Gaming has always been a part of their lives and is integrated into their lifestyles. Gaming community as a subculture. Gamers are part of a network of people who share similar interests and experiences through video games. Outside